Giuseppe the MC, thank you for coming on, man. How you been?
I've been fantastic, buddy. How are you?
Doing good. Why don't you give us a little background about yourself if anyone hasn't heard you or been on your page?
Okay, well, I'm Giuseppe the MC. That's my real name is Giuseppe Maleka, but I decided to go with this moniker of Giuseppe the MC. I started off my career as an MC, emceeing events, and I always had this bug, sorry, as an MC, and then slowly that transitioned into comedy, and then that transitioned into comedic videos, and that's where I am today. I do comedy. I make, I believe, is funny content, and
Oh
MC
yeah.
events. That's my
Yeah,
thing.
you got funny content, man. We love your videos, love the skits, with the
Yeah,
nonna, the no no like what your the parents that you play with the wigs and everything. It's hilarious.
yeah,
It's actually crazy because me and Mike know you personally. I used to cut your hair a few times
that's
at the
right.
barbershop a while ago, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's crazy because you have a different hairdo now. Which,
yeah,
by the
yeah.
way, your hair looks
Now
great
my
regardless. So
oh, thanks. When you were cutting my hair, I had for those who do know me, I had this cone, and but with the cone, I had the sides shaved. And I will tell you without a doubt that you always came up with the craziest designs for the side of my head. And I'm like, oh man, yeah, Adam's doing my hair again, which is cool. And you were actually doing my hair at the cusp of when I was on tour with Giovanni. So there was a lot of people watching, and I got a lot of
Giovanni,
compliments. Yeah,
Giovanni,
that's
had to
right.
get that out there.
So I'm surprised you changed your hairstyle though, man. I thought that was like your trademark with the cone.
You know what? It was funny because not to go with everything that was going on in the world right now, but with everything that was going on in the world right now, I was like, you know what? This is a chance for me to do a I've always wanted to do like Giuseppe 2.0. Like, okay, so everybody knows me, and of those people that know me, a lot of them know me because of my hair, right?
Yeah.
So, I didn't know if people were attracted to me because of my comedy or because of my hair, right? But I always said my stance was if I can't get them with my comedy, I'll get them with my hair. And so last year I was in a mood, and I said, you know what? Forget it. First off, I couldn't get into cars anymore. It was so tall that I had to fix it at like at the venues that I would be performing at, and I had to travel with a suitcase of stuff, and I did need a suitcase of products to put my hair together. And I said, that's it. And I had cut it off completely, like it was like short.
Mhm.
Um, but I added a little color. I said, okay, I got to do something different, and I added a little blue just in the banks, and people were like, what are you doing? And then now, and I haven't cut it since that day. So it's August 1st of 2020. I haven't cut it since. So, and I learned that I have curly hair. I didn't know I had curly hair.
I didn't know
I,
either.
You didn't
I
even
didn't
know.
even
I
know.
Yeah,
yeah, and
same.
you were cutting my hair
Yeah.
because I always fought it. From when I had a ear length, let's say my ear, like when I was younger,
Mhm.
uh, you can't tell that it's curly, right? I knew I had waves, and in January, like, oh man, I really want my hair to be like an afro, and I was trying to find different ways. I was googling how can a white guy have an afro? Like I was just trying to figure it out. And then somebody said, but you have curly hair, right? I'm like, I do. And then they're like, just use curl creams and all these things. And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa. And I performed my first
Oh wow.
show last like on Saturday for the first time in a year and a half. And it was like my moment to see if this fro would actually work, and it did. And it was so yeah. So now my hair doesn't require a hairdresser at all outside of the color, and no cuts, and just something completely different. And now again, I'm being known as the guy with the hair. So either way, I can't escape
Yeah,
this.
it's all right. Less of a hassle, but you still get the reward from it, I guess. But I like it, man. I
Exactly.
like the curly. I think it's good.
Yeah.
But
Thanks, man.
yeah, but listen, man, tell us a little bit more about your videos because they're hilarious. Every time we post them on Facebook or Instagram, they always do good. Like, and I know too,
Yeah.
you put in a lot of work with them. You don't just kind of do them quick, and you take the time and effort and think it out and write the captions and do it in Italian, do it in English. Like, tell us a little bit about how you put them together and how you get ideas and just the whole process.
Okay. So the ideas, I mean, as you know, the theme of my videos are always about my mom, right?
Yeah.
A few rare ones about my dad, but they're mainly about my mom and my relationship with her. And my whole comedy is based on my mother and that, that son-mother relationship. And, the character was created. I was making fun of my mother on stage before I was making videos about her because, I was performing before Instagram allowed us to have videos. And then when I did my first show 6 years ago, I was so high on my first big show, I quit my job and said, "This is what I want to do." And so then I'm like, okay, but how do I promote myself? And I started to create other videos like Calabrese phrases of the day. They weren't even my mom videos. And then one day I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do a video about my mom and talk about, her telling me to come over to eat. I'm like, no, Ma, I can't eat pasta. And she says, oh, why? You don't love me anymore? And then I was like, okay, Mom, coming over. And that video was basic 15 seconds. The editing was okay, but it wasn't like, obviously from your first video to your last video, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
But that video struck a chord with a lot of people. And so then I'm like, hey, I got something here. I can make more of these. And so, yeah, the videos take a lot of work. To all my peers out there who make videos, man, like people don't get, like, especially when you're playing yourself in two different ways, you got to record like one side,
Yeah.
and record the other. And you've done videos, so I see you.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've been trying to make videos, and yeah, it's tough, man. It's not easy. Like,
yeah,
it's definitely better off putting the time into it too. But when you put more time into it, then you get less up. So it's tricky, man. You want to have like a balance with
Yeah,
no,
quantity
I
and
know.
quality.
that's the toughest part about like content creating. Even when I make stuff, even with like when I make clips from the podcast that I do and stuff, I know how hard it is even just to edit whatever footage I already have. It's even hard to just
Oh
get
yeah.
it up there.
So my videos have all been a minute or less. I don't
Mhm.
I don't try to make mom videos that are longer than a minute. My reasoning behind that is I want repeat watch. So if you have a video that's longer than a minute, it's great, hilarious, but are you going to watch it again?
Yeah.
I don't know. So for me, it's like, okay, I repeat it. And because they're so tightly recorded, sometimes people watch them over again just to catch what I said the first time. Which is good. Like, you want, in the
Yeah,
video
you want
world,
more watch time.
you want more watch time and such. And then there was a point, I was about 6 videos in, 6 years ago, when I said, I got to put translations, because not only am I speaking Italian, but I wasn't speaking Italian. I'm speaking Calabrese and my Calabrese, because, there's different dialects within Calabria. And I'm like, some people aren't getting my stuff. And then I remember the first video that I translated, that was the game changer. That was like, people are like, okay, now other Italians can watch my video and enjoy it, and other nationalities can enjoy it. Now
Yeah.
other nationalities were watching the videos and say, oh yeah, my Portuguese mom is the same way. My Spanish mom's the same way.
Yeah, it
And
broadens
I'm
your
like, yeah.
audience.
But I'm like, no, you're not us. Nobody's Italian. But whatever, I would just entertain that, and it really opened up my world to a broader audience. But yeah, it takes time. You got to map it out. And, I'm always a last minute guy. I've picked a time slot for my mom's videos, Saturday morning, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And sometimes I start editing on Friday night at midnight. And it's a 4 to 5 hour process to edit a
Yeah.
1 minute video. It's harder to edit a 1 minute video than a 10-minute video, because 1 minute you're trying to cut it, and then you're trimming, and sometimes you got to make it
precise. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to make a life decision on cutting out a line. You're like, oh no, how is this going to make sense now if I take out this one line? But I make it work every single time. And
sure, translating it takes forever too.
Yeah, especially since Calabrese, it doesn't translate to English. It does.
That's why you got to be doing that manually. I'm sure you can't like hit up a company and say, hey, translate this for me. And
Yeah, and it's not only that. There's some words that just don't translate.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, when my mom says, "Oh, fuck now," which is like, in pure translation, it means, "Oh my fire." Well, what does that mean, right? But I know what it means. It's kind of like, "Oh my God," right?
Yeah.
So I was, after a certain point, I'm like, I can't write oh my fire, because you can't translate word for word. You put what the feeling is. And there's times where I film a whole video and then I'll call my cousins and say, what did I mean in this? How do I explain this in English? And we're all stumped. We get on like conference calls and you're like, okay, maybe this sentence means this, and maybe this sentence means that. And then we just come up with a consensus and like, okay, this is the best possible scenario of what this means in English. For one sentence, I'll be on the phone for like an hour trying to figure it out.
then
Well,
did you ever
Giuseppe,
get
Giuseppe, it's
sorry, go
funny
ahead, Adam.
because, no, it's okay. It's funny because Calabrese, people say it's like farmer, it's like the farmer language. It's like terrible
Right.
dialect, or people say, right? But I think it's hilarious. I think like Calabrese, especially the way you do your videos and you like when you speak in that language, there's so many funny ways of saying things. Like I remember you did one, it was like Italian phrase of the day. It was, and hey, I don't speak Italian, so don't get upset if I can't say it, right? But it's like
No, it's okay.
Sendayu Venu Loco or something like that. You did that one.
Yeah.
And it's just funny because
when you look, if I come there, I'm gonna, and then
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. It's every dialect has their way of, like, if somebody says something in the dialect and you understand the dialect, oh, look out. But if you explain it to somebody, if I come there, okay, you come there, what? I get it. It's
do people in the comments ever give you a hard time about the dialect, or like, oh, this isn't the correct way, like that kind of stuff?
So in the beginning, I got a lot of it. I got a lot of Italian purists messaging me saying, you're actually bringing the culture down. And there's times when you engage and there's times you don't. And when you don't engage, because when you engage, you're just feeding into them. But at the same time, there's times when I used to direct message them and say, hey, let me talk to you right now. Let me explain to you something. I'm not bringing the culture down, I'm bringing it up. I'm trying to have people remember their roots. I try to remind people that we came from somewhere, and they didn't speak pure Italian. Pure Italian was introduced into schools at a certain point, but everybody spoke their dialect. And if you can speak your dialect, why not? I didn't even know English until I was 4 years old, and I was born in Canada. I didn't know.
Wow.
But I only knew dialect. I wouldn't even say I knew Italian. I still don't know Italian that well. I'm okay now because as older I've learned, and I've learned I understand the language. But if I get interviewed by some Italian radio station or TV station, I have to warn them in advance. Say, hey, I'm not perfect at this, so I'm just going to preface the whole interview with, I'm going to be speaking Calabrese today, not Italian.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I used to get a lot, and but it slowly over time went away. Now I get insults because I don't look Italian. I look other razze, let's say. And they're like, oh, you look like this. So, why do you talk like this? I'm like, that's just ignorance, right? But
you can't win with everybody, unfortunately. But I do like how you brought up the Italian roots. That's what Mike tries to portray in his page, and why I love it so much, because I do feel like people like you, Giuseppe, and Mike bring the Italian culture together, the community, trying to lift it up. And I want to actually talk about your roots for a second, because a lot of your videos, you said, are inspired by your mom because of your relationship with her, and sometimes your dad as well in the videos that you play both, right? Those both characters. Are a lot of those skits true stories? Like, did you actually go through these things like in life? Like, tell us about like your upbringing a bit and how like a lot of these skits came to life.
So I will tell you without a doubt, 100%, that every single video I did or do, usually that exact same scenario, word for word, happened a few days earlier. Like they're facts. They're 100% fact. I might embellish like the yelling and the screaming, but they're fact. I did a video. I did a video at Christmas time about how my mom called me saying, hey, she was speaking in English, literally, and saying, hey, you can't come over for Christmas because of the lockdown, let's say. But then in dialect, she's saying, hey, you can come over, just go park in the back or just park across the street and come around the back, and we're going to eat in the base. It was an actual conversation. And I'm like, how do I not put this in a video?
Yeah.
How do I not, right? How do I not portray every conversation I have with them? And they're fact. Yes, I as a comedian, I will embellish and try to find the funny But if you take the
100%.
core of all my videos, they're all real, all of them. And even my shows that I perform, I don't tell jokes. Everybody's like, oh, tell me a joke. I don't tell jokes. I tell stories.
Yeah.
That's
And
I don't know how else to explain it, right?
does your family ever watch your videos? Like, what do they comment on it?
So my mom in the beginning was like, it was tough for her because she denied that was her. Like, she's like, no, I'm not like that. I go, Mom, we just had this conversation. Now, if she does something, I do this thing where I put my hand out and I go I look at her and I pretend I'm writing. And she's like, oh, okay, I see what's happening. Now you're gonna make another video. Oh, okay, I see what's happening. I go, Mom, you're just laying it for me on a silver platter. So, and the funny parts are because I shoot a lot of videos at my mom's house, right? So she
Yeah.
sees, I have to
Yeah.
like silence them. They'll be watching like Rai, right? Like actually watching, and I have to like because the living room in their house has like double doors, so it shuts the door. So I have to get them to silence it. They're not allowed to move around. So I have to pre-warn them. So they know what I'm doing. I'm shooting, I'm screaming. And when I shoot a
Yeah.
line, especially one of her lines, I want to get it so accurate that I'll say the same line 10 times. And I'm
Mhm.
screaming and screaming and screaming. So they know what I'm doing. And then the video will come out on the Saturday, let's say. And then sometimes they'll watch it right away because now they finally got an iPad. And or sometimes somebody will call them and say, did you see what your son just did? And they're like, no, we haven't seen it yet, or they pretend they did just because they don't want to look like fools. But
Yeah.
for the most part, they watch them and they get a laugh out of them. My
No,
mom, she really laughs out of them lately, so, which is good.
Giuseppe, you said that they got an iPad, right? Let me guess. How hard was it to teach them how to use it?
Oh, this, you know what? Listen, I'm a Samsung guy, so I was learning it myself, right? So just signing into like iTunes and signing into Facebook and signing into all these things took months just to get them to figure it out. But now, like, I go over to my mom's house and I see her like flicking through the iPad. I'm like, oh man.
Well, she can use it better
Got
than
it
my
down.
mom. My mom,
Yeah.
it's a daily struggle. My mom, every
I
day. And you know what's funny about my mom? Sometimes with her phone, I don't know if it's just an Italian thing, but they'll do stuff on their own, and then it's like when you're there, Adam, how do you do this? How do you do this?
yeah.
It's like you just did
She's
it
playing it.
yesterday.
She knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't forget that if we take our Italian parents for like they don't know, but they know.
They know.
They were able to pull off
They're
so much.
furbo.
Yeah, they were able to pull off so much with so little. Now you're handing them technology, they can pull it off. They just like to play this card like they don't know. So then they can always be like they don't want to show that they're in with the new. They want to show that they're still old and Italian.
Yeah.
But they know. Trust me, I busted my parents on the iPad, changing things, using the remote perfectly. I'm like, aren't you the same person who a minute ago was asking me, I can't get it to work? No. When
Yeah.
they're not in eyesight, they can do everything.
Of course.
It's awesome,
Yeah.
man. But tell us a little bit too more about the comedy, because I thought that was interesting. After you did one show, you just knew you wanted to do it, like quit your job and everything. How'd you know from that one show? Like, what kind of feeling did you get that show that just
Well,
hit you hard?
so you have to go back a little bit. So basically, so I'm 44 right now. I did my first comedy show at 38, right? Which is already like 18 years behind when most people decide they're going to go into comedy. Most people think most people try it out in their 20s, right?
Yeah.
Like all my other peers, a lot of because I'm friends with a lot of comedians that are not Italian, and they started very young. And I was in high school. I was president, so I was already comfortable on a microphone, right? And then after high school, I already started to feel not special anymore. In high school, I was president. I was like the king.
Yeah.
I was always on the mic. Then when high school finished, I was just a number in university. I was nobody, and I started to feel down. And then I became friends with other people who needed an MC for something, and I'm like, oh, I can do it. I can do it. I'm gonna be your MC. And they're like, okay, because I was doing it for free. They're like, oh, great. And I said, all I ask is you let me be a funny MC. And they're like, oh, that's exactly what we want. And so I started to work on being a funny MC and just, making jokes and, joking about my mom. Everything was in English. But slowly over the years, I started to do especially if I knew I was in an Italian audience, right? Like the majority of the people at the shows that I was emceeing were Italian. I said, okay, let me just say one word in Italian. And they would just explode. It was just a different feeling. And so now I was at a point where I couldn't wait to MC my next event. And so then, 12 years ago, my sister-in-law asked me to MC her wedding. And I turned that into the first Giuseppe the MC show, like the actual first show. Like my opening monologue before I introduced the bride and groom to come through the hall, I spoke for 25 minutes.
Oh man.
People were waiting, like they were laughing. I was joking. I was just making fun of everybody, making fun of everything, the Italians, the food, before we had even eaten, and the bride and groom hadn't even walked in yet. And then throughout the night, I was making jokes, and everybody couldn't wait for me to talk again. And then at the end of that wedding, somebody asked me to MC their kid's wedding. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I have a business here. And that's where Giuseppe the MC was born. And then I was emceeing for many years. And then there was one point where my sister got married. I did a whole speech in Calabrese, 25 minutes, of how my mother loves my new brother-in-law more than she loves me, which I still think is fact. And it had such a reaction that people were asking my dad for the wedding video. They're like, hey, can we get your daughter's wedding video so we can watch that skit again? And I'm like, who would ask for somebody's wedding video?
That's awesome.
It's just like, who does that? And so that put in my head, I got to do a show. And so I did. I rented an Adam would know, the Colossus Theater in Vaughan. It's a movie theater.
Yeah.
It's like a famous player, but now it's Cineplex, right? I rented this theater. They wanted, I'll tell you straight out, they wanted a couple $1,000. I was charging $20 a ticket. As I said, as long as I sell 100 tickets, I'll break even. I'm okay. Well, I don't know what happened, because I didn't have Instagram back then. I had like a couple pictures on Instagram. There was no videos.
Yeah.
I just went out there and say, guys, I have this show, and I gave tickets out to people to sell, like an event. I say, hey guys, so you're gonna sell 10, you're gonna sell 20. What are you doing? I'm doing a show. What's your show about? I don't know yet. Just sell the show. So I sold the sizzle before anybody knew what I was.
Yeah.
And I sold out. My show was in May. I started selling tickets at Christmas time prior. By January, the end of January, I was sold out, 400 seats.
Wow.
And then now it was like this hot ticketed item for people to come to the show. And they're like, oh, see if you can squeeze me in. And then something happened with the location. And they're like, we have to give you another room. And I negotiated with them. So I basically got a second room for free. And I'm like, okay, guys, I'm adding another show. I still hadn't performed yet. So by the time my shows came along, which were May 14th, and then subsequently May 20th, I had 2 sold out shows at 400 people each. And that was the first time I ever performed. Like, it was my show. People paid to see me. I didn't try my set out 7 minutes in a bar. Like, I just did a 1-hour show about my mother. Most of it was in English, but let's say like 30% of it was in Calabrese. And after that second show, I decided I don't want to do anything else. And I literally quit my job like a week later.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And how do you, I don't know, because if you told me I had to say a minute-long speech in front of 10 people, I'd probably be too nervous to freaking do it. Like, how do you talk for 25 minutes and then sell out 2 shows with 400 people? And like, where do you get how do you get the balls to get up and do it, man?
I think
crazy.
I think it's just naturally in him. Giuseppe's always, and this is from what I know about Giuseppe when I cut his hair, he's a very charismatic person. Like, for anybody watching that hasn't seen Giuseppe, please go follow him now because he's hilarious. But it's just, I know how charismatic you are. You're very open to talk. Even talking to you now, it just feels like 3 friends talking. And trust me, I know how it feels to probably go
Yeah.
on stage and like go in front of people. So yeah, I guess how do you do it for 25 minutes? Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So
Like it's because you didn't even have, you said you didn't even have anything prepared. You sold the shows before you like knew it. Like I would be like, holy shit. I would be so nervous, man. I don't know.
it,
That's
it's well, again, it started from high school. So when in high school, I remember the first time I had to grab the mic to talk about anything, I was but shaking, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, but if I can just make them laugh, I'll be okay. And so I won every single time. And it just worked for me. And it's not a, it's, it, I hate to make it sound cocky. Like I was always good on a microphone, but I was always good on a microphone. I don't know why. It just was that way. I hate reading. If you give me a piece of paper and say, read this, that's where I get nervous because they weren't my words. And so you'll see me holding the page, like shaking.
yeah.
Like that's when I'm nervous because I don't want to screw up somebody else's words. But if there were my words and I know what I have to say and I'm confident what I'm saying, then I'm not nervous. I don't get nervous on stage because I'm telling the truth. I'm telling stories about my mom. So if you're telling the truth, you shouldn't be nervous. You should be nervous when you're telling a lie. When you have confidence in what you're saying, in my opinion, you shouldn't be nervous, right? And so over time, again, it takes practice. So you continue to perfect your craft by continuously getting on stage. When I practice for my routines, so that show, by the way, that I didn't write down one joke.
Wow.
I don't write jokes. I've never written. I just started scripting my videos now. When we were talking earlier about my videos and how I plan them out. I used to just like say them in my head and remember the lines. I'm like, maybe I should write them down so I can make
Yeah.
sure. So now I just get through them faster. I'm like, okay, that's my next line. That's my next line. But when I decided I was going to do my first show, the moment I put my deposit down on the venue, I started to tell stories in my head. And these stories, it was just like that speech I did at my sister's wedding. They're just stories that I would repeat while I'm driving and while I'm like, people are talking. And I'm like just repeating in my head. And so I memorized an entire show without even writing it down. I memorized the order, how it had to be. And so when it came down to performing it, the only difference was there was people in front of me. If not, I had repeated the routine 1,000 times. So yeah, you could say nervous, but I wasn't because I knew exactly what I had to say. It was like I said, I performed a week ago or on the weekend, and it was virtually the same show I did 6 years ago, just in another city. I performed in London, Ontario, which is about 2 hours away from here, and I performed in Hamilton the week earlier. These are cities around Toronto, but I never performed, and it had been a year and a half since I performed because of what's going on in the world right now. And I just got on stage and just said it again. I get nervous when there's, and maybe this is selfish. I get nervous when it's like a 500 seater. It's all sold out and I see one empty seat. And my whole brain is on that seat that entire show. Why is somebody not sitting there? Why wasn't I not popular enough to sell that one other ticket? But I sold 499. It's just my brain goes there. My brain says, when somebody gets up, maybe they have to go to the washroom. Maybe maybe they're literally gonna, excuse my language, piss their pants, and they gotta go. And I'm like, whoa, what am I doing wrong? Why are you getting up? But they come back like a minute later.
Yeah. But I mean, thinking that
So,
way probably helps you improve. Like you said, the more shows you do, I mean, I'm sure that having that thought process of like, how can I constantly keep working on my craft? Like you said, like, I'm sure that goes a long way. It's probably good
oh
to
yeah, of
have that
course.
mentality.
I will tell you that I enjoy the art of practice. I love practicing my routines to the point where I don't need to anymore. It's funny, just before I get on stage, I do like a zip through in 5 minutes. And I'll say like, okay, now you're gonna go into this, now you're gonna say this, now you're gonna say this, now you're gonna say that. And I have that whole routine.
Yeah.
I try to make it seem that I'm just saying it like for the first time. I try to make it seem that
Yeah.
Because I try to engage the audience, but most professional comedians, they set people up with a sentence knowing already what the answer is going to be back. And
Yeah.
they're just setting people up. And there's a lot of comedians that are really, really good at it. Really good at it. And I marvel those guys. Like I look at those guys and I'm like, wow, look at what he just, I knew what he did or she
Mhm.
did. I know what they're doing. But they have the whole audience convinced that they came up with it on the spot. And
Yeah,
I
I
know,
getcha.
and I know that because I've seen them perform elsewhere. I'm like, he just did that. He just did it again. And I'm like, the guy's a genius. I
Yeah.
love it. I
yeah,
love watching other comics and how they transition. Because it's a true art form. Comedy is very like, it's not like a presentation. You're
Mhm.
actually trying to entertain them. People have paid money for you to make them laugh. So there's a little bit of pressure there.
yeah.
uh,
I was gonna ask you too, about, I guess, what you just said about, like, because comedy is an art form, and comedy is very subjective, right? It's hard to really, like, I think comedy is the hardest, probably the hardest thing. Even like comedic movies, those are the hardest to do, because if you don't make someone laugh, it's like it kind of defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do, right? So
no,
when you ever
I know.
whenever you get on stage and stuff, like, do you ever like worry about, I guess, like hecklers or people who are gonna say stuff, and, like, I guess, how do you deal with that criticism on stage?
So the way I perform is my shows. I almost set them up virtually heckle proof.
Okay.
That's how I'm ready to go because I don't swear on stage. I don't talk about anything politics wise. I try not to offend anybody. I make fun of people, but I'll make fun of myself 10 times before I make fun of somebody
Yeah.
once, right?
Yeah.
Like if I make a small jab at another nationality, like I'll make that jab, but then I'm like, yeah, but look at how foolish we are. Like I flip it quick, right?
Yeah.
Um, I would say that I am lucky enough that only once in my entire career of performing that I wasn't heckled, but somebody made a comment that threw me off and I was lost the entire show. I was on tour with Joe Vadi a few years ago, and which was itself the biggest honor in the
Yeah.
world, right? Because Joe Vadi is Joe Vadi. There's no denying who he is. And so when he asked me to come on tour, I took it very serious. I was nervous because here's me who's been headlining like on my own right and seeing comedy shows. And now my idol comes along and says, you're going to open up for me and you have 15 minutes. That's all you're getting because obviously there's a time structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to write an act for 15 minutes, like come up with an act. Which, by the way, the day that he gave me the guidelines of what I was allowed to say, not allowed to say, because there are some rules, right?
Yeah.
That night I came up with the whole 15 minutes in like one shot, one practice. I don't know where it came to me. It just came to me, and it's some of my best material. But I performed it. We did 11 shows. We did 4 shows in Montreal. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, night after night. The Sunday was the night that all my friends were going to be there, like all my Montreal friends. And I have a big love for Montreal, and I have a lot of great friends there. And so if you know that I put a lot of sparkles on me when I perform, it's not just my hair. Like I'm dazzled up. I'm like I come out like, what? Who's this guy? So I over sparkled. I just came out with so much confidence. I came out with so much confidence that someone had enough confidence to say back something. And it was basically, she said so innocently and so sweetly, she said, hey, you look like a Christmas tree. And that's funny because I looked like a Christmas tree, but she had said it right when I was delivering my first line of my first joke. And that line is like the line that just basically takes the piss out of me because of the way I look. And so I was making fun of myself with that line, but she said something so funny that people were laughing at her line and didn't hear what I had said. And so
Yeah.
I just got in my head that they weren't laughing at me. Sorry, they weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at me because of what this lady said.
Yeah.
And then, do you know how long that 15 minutes was? Like a month. I couldn't. And then I said the next line and the next line, and I wasn't delivering it the way I deliver it. And it was like, it took me, so 15 minutes, it literally took me 8 minutes to recover. They were getting it, they were laughing, but they weren't exploding and laughing because
That's
you could
crazy.
see it. And I recovered at the end, but when I got off that stage, man, there was always like a high five from Joe. And hey, you did amazing. But
Yeah.
that time when I got off the stage, he looked
He
at
could
me like
tell.
he could tell that I was
He knew.
destroyed. Like he
Yeah, because he
wasn't
probably
like,
saw
hey, you
you.
did. Yeah, he wasn't like, hey, you did. He didn't flat out say, hey, you did
He could tell
poorly.
the
But
difference between like your normal
oh yeah,
performance and that one,
I
100%.
I
Yeah.
I literally cried the entire time that he was on stage. I was like back
Oh
in the
man.
corner in my dressing room, like crawled into a ball, just crying. And they
So
had people to console me.
if
And I was like, and I never want to do this again. That's all I had in my head.
damn.
And then I had a big talk with him. Sorry, I had a big talk with him the next day, and he's like, "Hey, it happens. You think every performance I've ever done came out the way it was, the way I wanted it to be? There are times when I just did the same routine because I had just done that same routine 10 times earlier, and
Yeah.
and I killed. And
Yeah.
that time I was like, is this mic on? Like nothing's working." And that was actually the greatest moment in my career because it prepared me for those moments when someone can throw you off. Now, when I hit the stage, I'm like, somebody call me a Christmas tree. Somebody give me
Yeah,
something.
that was actually my
Yeah.
question. I was gonna say, if that exact situation happened again, what would you do now? You know?
It's like Joe gave me a line. He said, if somebody calls you Christmas tree, you just point, hey, Bon Natal. You just like right away, just be ready with it.
Yeah.
And now no one ever called me a Christmas tree from that point, but it was just like, and I felt that even on this weekend that I did a show in London, I was the loosest I'd ever been. And it was very like somebody throws something at me. Sometimes what people don't get when they're watching comedy is they got to actually be quiet and just laugh. Some
Yeah.
people like to, because they think they know where the joke is going, they like to throw out the punchline and the whole room is quiet and you're like, ah, and that person, and you're like, you just messed up my entire joke. But you have to like grab it and say, yeah, you're right. That's exact, and you
Yeah, I saw it happen at the Rodea comedy show. Someone was talking too loud, and the guy Guban Johnny who performs before him, it threw him off. They were like sitting right up front. They were just talking very, very loud. And you know how you kind of can call someone out and make a joke like, hey, whatever, be quiet. And you kind of do it funny, but they just like wouldn't be quiet. And then after the
yeah,
show, he was like, man, that really threw me off because they just
yeah, I
wouldn't stop
know.
talking. So
Yeah,
It's
that
hard. You get it in your head. It gets in your head because you feel like they don't care about you.
yeah.
B, they're like, it's actually rude, right? Like, like, hey, there's other people around you, but they're in their own world. But you know what? Sometimes you have to think they're just having such a good time that
mhm.
that's how they have
Yeah.
such a good time.
It's hard. It's hard
So
to really, I guess, distinguish sometimes. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
hard to say
yeah,
like because there's so many things going on at a comedy show. But then you think like, oh yeah, people paid for the show as well, and these people are ruining it. But wait, are they having a good time or are they just being dicks? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I think
it's
of
hard
it
to
as like
really tell.
sometimes you probably want to hang out with your friends. You probably haven't seen them in whatever, a couple weeks. You go to a show, you want to talk to them, and I don't know, you're kind of
yeah,
excited. And I don't know. I feel like that can kind of come out sometimes for sure. But
Yeah, I
that's
think
right.
I think the main thing is as long as like Giuseppe, as long as you're putting on a great show, I guess as long as everyone's having a good time, that's the most important thing. And I like how you said that you like Joe, who was one of your idols, Joe Vadi, like he gave you that motivation, those piece of advice to say like it happens, and now when you go on stage, you're able to deal with those quote unquote hecklers, right? I guess
Right.
what I have to say for you, what I'm curious about is, you have all these idols and people you looked up to. Is there any piece of advice being a veteran in the industry? Is there a piece of advice you can give to younger comedians starting out from things you've learned? What would you tell them?
So I will say that Sorry, and there's a phone ringing in my house. Give me one second, it'll shut
Okay,
off in a second.
that's a normal Italian thing. The phones are ringing,
Yeah,
everyone's
okay.
cooking.
It's my,
Nailed it.
I'll tell you what it is, and you can leave this in the video. It's my mom calling, guaranteed. There's only two people that call my
Who's
house.
that? Who's it?
It's either my mother or duck cleaners. Like they always people are calling my house to clean my ducks.
Yeah.
But it's usually my mom because it's 12 and she knows that at this point I should be feeding the kids.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's calling literally to say if I've made anything for them yet and if she can just come over and make it. Like this is a daily conversation, and I'm like, I should have warned my mother not to call during this time, but I wasn't thinking, and that's my mom.
It makes for the
Okay.
best
And-
content, man. It's a reel. It's a rich.
I put mine on
Right.
do not disturb too, because my mom calls every day too. Just, did you eat yet? Do you need anything? Like, it's funny, man. It's
Yeah. Well,
Italian
my
mom
my
story.
phone, because the Zoom call right now is on like I put it on airplane mode with the Wi-Fi, but it's the house phone. I didn't think that I put it on do not disturb. So, but yeah, where were we at? Where were we asking?
I asked
yeah.
basically like a piece of advice that you would give to, I guess, up and coming comedians and stuff, that since you've been in like a veteran in the industry.
Well, thank you for calling me a veteran. That's you know, I don't have the experience that a lot of comics have, but what I will tell you is that I what I try to explain to comics or people that are trying out is write the right material that is actually you, and don't try to write material for the audience.
Mhm.
Because if you're trying to write what you think they're going to laugh at, you're going to make a big mistake. Because you're not hitting the mark, you're not being true to yourself. You know, I want people to understand that it already takes enough guts just to get up on stage.
Mhm.
So kudos to anybody who has the courage to get up on stage, because it takes a lot. And you know, I want everybody to have a chance. I want everybody to try what they're willing to try, because I took that chance. I took that chance at 38 years old. I was not the age that a comedian should be going into comedy, like somebody should be going into comedy. And you know, that cliche, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Yeah. Because I you know, I had a really cush job. I was making a lot of money doing what I used to do. And I decided to set that aside and do this. So, you know, for me, the most important part is trying to explain to people, hey, when you're on stage, be aware of your stage presence. Understand that people are looking at you in a certain way. Work on your pauses. Pausing in silence, handling silence on stage is the true art of comedy, because there's going to be times when people don't get your jokes, and there's going to be times when you ask for silence. Like you're basically setting them up, and you need them to be silent so you can punch them hard with a joke, right?
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
I find that a lot of comedians, they barrel through their routine because they just like they want to get it all out. And I'm like, you're not saying it right. I had on the weekend, I can say that I can take credit for like plucking a few comedians out of obscurity. Like for instance, my first show that I did in Montreal, if you guys know Siciliano de Montreal, Nick Messina, he was making some funny videos online. And then I'm like, hey, you know what? I like this guy. I want him to come perform with me. And I messaged him. He's like, I never performed a day in my life. I'm like, yeah, but you have content. No. It took me 2 months to convince the guy to come perform with me. And he nailed it. He nailed it because all I said was, he's like, oh, you want to go over my routine with me? No, I just want you to tell the truth on stage.
Yeah. Then be yourself.
And
Yeah.
That's awesome.
and be yourself. And he did, and he killed it. Nikki D'Agostino, who's an accordion player. I think you might have even featured her on your page once or twice in the past, Mike. I saw her on your page years ago, and I'm like, wow, beautiful girl, plays the accordion. She's in Australia. I'm gonna go on a tour in Australia. I'd like someone to open up for me there. I didn't want to ask Joe. You're not gonna ask the king to come tour with you. I just started to get to know the guy, so you know, you don't
Yeah.
ask him. Who can I get? Hey, I got a hold of her on the phone. I'm like, I want you to do comedy with me. And she's like, I never did comedy in my life. I know, but you can perform. You have what it takes.
Yeah.
And she I gave her a few pointers and she came up with a script and did it and performed and killed it. On the weekend, I had this girl, Sandrina Lowe. She's from Niagara Falls. She came to perform with me in Hamilton. I saw her TikTok 7 months ago and I'm like, hey, you're funny. You should be on stage. She's like, no, 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 no. After a little bit convincing, a little bit of coaching, she performed her act and she killed it. If I see in somebody something that is worth being on stage, I will tell them flat out. I want young comics to grow. I want people to be better than me.
That's awesome.
I want to be number one, but at the same time, being number one is also bringing people up
to get to where. Well, that's being a leader. That's being a leader at the end of the day.
There are comedians out there that just don't. They want you to succeed, but they don't want you to be number one because they want to be number one only. And I've seen a lot of comics like basically like bash other comics and oh, he stole my joke and he's saying it and I'm looking at them like, man, you're not bigger than anybody else here. We're all trying to make it. Look at like Sebastian. Sebastian took 20 years to become where he's at. Everybody's like, oh, this guy just came out. No, he didn't. He put 20 years, man. He put 20 years.
People see the surface level. That's it. They just see
they just see that. And then it's funny when he'll post something and most people find it funny. And then some people make a stupid comment. And I'm like, do you know what it took for him to do that? You know what it takes? And I don't like when people, I want just people to be motivated and to push and to improve. If I see something off, I'll say, hey, maybe you should adjust that routine a bit just to, to help them. But, the advice I give everybody is to give it a chance, give it a shot. And the most important is don't wait for anybody. So there are a lot of comics. They're like, I don't get called. No one calls me to come perform at their perform here and there. And I'm like, maybe because I, out of nowhere, decided I was going to do a show with 800 people and write a 1 hour show. But I just try to explain to people, nobody's calling you to come do a show. Okay, go find a space, put 50 chairs, charge people $10 and perform.
There you go.
And just do it. Just do it. Just do it. And then eventually they're going to call you. There were people that used to say, why do you call yourself Giuseppe the MC? This is the stupidest name I ever heard. Are you an MC? Are you a rapper? What is it? Why do you want to box yourself? Now I walk down the street. They're like, hey, there's Giuseppe the MC. I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right? It took time, right?
That's
but
awesome.
It's like you have to pick something and go with it. Adjust if you see that it's not going too well, but stick to it and believe in yourself and don't wait for anybody else. Just do it.
Love it. And that kind of leads just what you were saying about working with other people, though, kind of leads. And Adam, if you want to ask a question after this, go ahead. But this is kind of my last question that I was curious about is just because, like you said, you're working with Joe and I see you doing a lot with Italians and the Italian community. And kind of like you said, a lot of people don't root for your success. A lot of people, I feel like, are, whatever, jealous or envious or want to be the best and this and that. Like, what's your experience just working with the community and how did you get to like work with people and get to a point where you just want to build them up and you don't care? And you know what I mean? Have you ever noticed from people, they've been kind of like not as true back to you and things like that?
Yeah, I do. I do. Like, I've always been when I first went to Montreal, decided to go on a tour. I went to Montreal. I was warned by the Toronto comedians. Oh, look out for those Montrealers. They're very this, they're very that, right? And then I was scared to go there. And I'm like, you know what? Instead of being scared, I'm going to invite them to my house, meaning the show. I messaged them all, say, hey guys, look, I'm coming to your town. Please come watch the show, backstage, any seat you want, come. Basically what I've done always in my career is open up and just pull people in. And that started a flow between Toronto and Ontario. I believe, honestly, I believe I helped with this transition of people kind of working together a lot more. I'm not trying to take the cake on that, but I'm just saying I know that I was very integral in that.
Yeah.
but yet there are comedians that just like, they want to be a part of my shows, but I don't get called to be a part of their shows. It's very strange,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
so I take it with a grain of salt, because again, like what I was telling you earlier, there's some people that just don't, they don't, either they don't want you to succeed, or they just don't know how to do what I do, which is, I'm a comedian, but that's not my career. My career is, I'm an event producer. I produce events. I
Mm-hmm.
get people to I get people to pay to go somewhere, and I just happen to be performing.
Yeah.
But my job is I'm a producer. I produce shows. I produce products. I produce videos. I'm creating content for people to go to my page. I'm creating content so that hardcore Italians will post on their page. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I create content for an audience.
Yeah.
And there are people, listen, I'll tell you flat out, and I'm not tooting your horn, but I'm going to toot it. You've been supporting me from day one. You've shared my stuff. You've broadcasted my stuff, which helps me a lot. There are other pages that just don't. They, like, my page is non-existent to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurts, but I get now their mentality. Their mentality is, well, what's he doing for me? Where your mentality has always been, hey man, this is just great content. I'm going to put it out there. You know how much that helps me as somebody growing? And even if I give a little shout out back and say, hey, thanks, Hardcore Italians, I know that I can't offer you what you've offered me. Your page is, in the hundreds of thousands. I'm in the 40,000 people. But I don't forget what people do for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so, hey man, you remember when you came to Toronto? I'm like, hey, I stopped everything I was doing. Let's go out. Let's go for a drink.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun.
It was, for me, it's like, hey man, I try to embrace everybody. And I always remember, you helped me one time, somehow or other, I'm going to help you back 10 times. I don't know how, I'll figure it out. And that's my attitude on how I run my life. And has it got me far? Do I have maybe the amount of followers I should have? Maybe not. Do I lose, like, oh, I gained 100 followers today, yeah, but I lost 75, like people come and go.
True.
And people like me and people don't, and I'm okay with that. I'm at a point right now where I'm okay with who I am, and I'm okay with who embraces me and who doesn't. And I learned my lesson. Like, if I'm going to work with somebody, okay, great, I'll go work with somebody. But I've learned quickly who's out there that's actually interested in working with me, and who's actually just interested in using me.
Yeah.
And I think most comedians learn that over time. I learned that. That's another thing I learned with Joe very quickly. He taught me a lot. And, we've talked about comedians that he's worked with in the past, and they're non-existent in his life anymore, because they jumped on his coattails and rode, and now all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't introduce myself as the guy that opened up for Joe Vadi ever, but there's a lot of comics that do, and it hurts. It hurts him because he worked so hard, and now all of a sudden they're like, oh, he's the Joe Vadi comedian. Joe and I spoke on the phone over the weekend, just to shoot the shit,
Yeah.
because we're friends. But I still idolize him, and he still gives me advice, and he still makes me feel like a person. And I try my best to make him feel like a person. I don't call him and say, hey, Joe, when can I be on your next show? I just say, hey, Joe, how's it going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I genuinely want to know how he's doing. I'm lucky enough to speak to the guy, and I'm lucky enough to speak to all the comics that I speak to. I'm lucky enough to be on this podcast. You have so many people that you can interview. How many times, if it's all the times that are ever on your show, how many times do you bring onto your show? Like, when I got the message a few weeks ago, hey, we want you on your podcast, I got butterflies in my stomach. I'm like, hey,
Oh man.
it feels good. It feels good that I know how you started I know how your page started. I know how everything started. You told
Yeah.
me everything,
Yeah.
and where you've been, where your page has transitioned, and what you've done for the Italian community. And Adam, what you're doing with this podcast, and how you've come in and you've basically created another facet of the hardcore brand.
Yeah.
It takes a lot, and to consider someone like myself to be a part of that, that's like that always makes me feel good. Where other people might say, well, it's about time I get on that podcast. Or maybe, and
Yeah,
I'm like, oh man, yeah, it feels good, So I'm very grateful. I'm always grateful. And
appreciate that too, man.
yeah, man.
I think it comes down to like again being Italian, not to like to say we're the best culture out there. I'm not gonna say that, but we're a great culture with a lot of great things to offer.
Whatever.
We are. Wink, wink. But it goes back to like our Italian roots and like how you said the way you were brought up, and the fact you always want to help people. That's how me and Mike are. That's what like I'm Calabrese. Mike, what's your background again? You're
Calabrese too.
Calabrese, right?
A little bit Calabrese. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all Calabrese. And it's like we all come from the same, upbringing or similar upbringing, and about how you wanted to help people. And I really think everything you said is so inspirational, and it motivates me because again, I'm young, and like me and Mike are both young enough that we started something. And the way that you got your start with comedy, emceeing, how you just put yourself out there and said, hey, let me do it, let me try that. If you were never brought, like, people are given opportunities all the time, but they don't want to take that opportunity because, again, it's like how you said, like that guy that you wanted to bring on your show, he was like, oh, I've never done that, never performed, and then you just told the guy, you said, listen, just come out and do exactly what you do. And then you said he killed it, right? When you're given opportunities, you just got to take it, even though you're going to be scared, or you're going to be like worried, oh, are they going to like it, this, that. You got to do it because you're never going to know. It's like you just said, you just got to do it. If you're worried about, oh, how am I going to start this? How am I going to start it? If you keep saying, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Then you're never going to do it. If you keep telling yourself, oh, is it going to take off? Who knows? But guess what? It's never going to take off. You just got to say, you know what? You got to know that nothing's that. What was I saying? You got to understand that nothing is certain in life, but you're never going to know. You're 100% of the shots you don't take at the end of the day. I think it's all about just putting yourself out there. So that's where I stand.
A couple of years ago, you were cutting my hair, and now I'm looking at a beautiful background that says the Up and Adam Show, and I'm like, where did this come from? Great thing. It's a great thing, and yeah, as an Italian, I wish we supported each other a lot more, but I see over time that we are supporting each other more and more and more, and it's a great thing.
All right, well, Giuseppe, sorry, man, I kind of have to run, but let us know, man, let us know where people can find you, follow you, your t-shirts. Why don't you plug everything where people can go look?
So everything is always Giuseppe the MC. So all social media. So Giuseppe, it's all one word, like Giuseppe, GIUSEPPE, .com, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that. I am my merch. I'm in a transition right now with a few things, but it's eventually all going to be on GiuseppeTheMC.com. And they can always see it there, and they can always see it on Hardcore Italians as well. So it's all great. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, for having me on the show. It meant a lot, and I won't forget.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man, and loved all your answers and had a blast talking for sure. So it's good catching up. We got to do it more often.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks so much to both you guys for doing this. And one more thing before we end it off, guys. Today, I was surrounded by a couple of stunads.
Yeah.
You can find that on the Hardcore Italians page as well.
Nice.
Up and Adam for 10% off. Boom.
Sounds good.
See you guys. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.
All right,
ciao.
Have a good one.
Thanks, man.